Haruto was a pathetic loser who we bullied so badly that he became the ultimate shut-in NEET that wasted his life watching anime recaps until he died looking at his screen, causing Phone-kun to isekai his ass. The goddess of plots felt bad for this bum, then promised to reincarnate him with overpowered skills with a harem of big canon anime girls, to make up for the garbage brain-rot life that he had lived before. Suddenly he wakes up as the son of a sleep-deprived king who looked like he couldn't pull out. Just then, the court magician brought in a magic crystal to measure his capabilities. And while it was activated, the king expected an overpowered child, since the queen is the famous Flash princess that defeated the Demon King. He hoped for level 50, but the mage announced that his base level is a measly 2. And to make matters worse, he didn't possess any element, which meant he could only use barrier magic. On hearing this, the king called his own baby a failure, and since he and the queen are a couple of scum, they unanimously agreed to announce that their baby died during conception. Haruto immediately realized his shitty luck also reincarnated with him, and even when the mage tried to dissuade the king, he ordered the maids to dump Haruto in the forest. This made goddess milkers begin to panic as she complained that she made him so overpowered that their system couldn't read his high mana level accurately. Not only did she not give him any element, she raised his level to 1002. Now in the forest, Haruto tried to escape his basket of death, but he couldn't move since he was wrapped like a mummy. He decided to try out his barrier magic and managed to pull it off, as well as change its shape at will. He then used it on himself and was able to move around using his mind. Just then, a massive wolf showed up and immediately tried to eat him, but failed to penetrate the barrier. He tried to create a bunch of barrier cubes to attack, but they simply bounced off the wolf who was getting pissed. Next, the smart ass used his barrier to pull a bunch of trees that he used to attack the wolf who didn't take much damage. As a last resort, he pulled a freaking rock from its core in an attempt to crush the wolf who surrendered in fear. But he didn't think she was the one begging, so she screamed to get his attention. Once things calmed down, she confessed that she wanted to boost her mana by eating him since she didn't know he would be strong, and then asked who he was, but he could only speak baby language. Unfortunately, she isn't Tim from Boss Baby, and couldn't understand him, so he decided to create an artificial voice box with his barrier cue. With this, he was now able to talk, and he introduced himself as Haruto before explaining how his bitch parents left him for dead because of his weak magic. However, the wolf could see his enormous magic aura and even assumed he was the demon lord as she freaked out. Since it was better than announcing that he was a loser degenerate in his previous life, he played along with the demon lord idea, and this made her hair stand all over as she resigned herself to die. But Haruto said he didn't have any intentions of harming her as long as she don't attack him, and this made her swear loyalty to him. He decided to ditch the overgrown dog, but the idiot mistakenly named her Flay, causing her to announce that they have successfully formed a pact. As he tried to explain the misunderstanding, he suddenly collapsed from hunger, so he asked her to give him a taste of her milkers before he died. On hearing this, the oversized dog decided to transform into a red-haired baddie with amazing plot development. Poor guy was about to make a fountain of nosebleed, so he used his barrier to conjure a bodysuit. She then began to strip, and when he asked why, she claimed she must first mate in order to produce milk, but she only ended up traumatizing him. While they'd wondered what to do next, they noticed someone approaching and decided to prepare for the worst. A man then showed up, revealing that he had come for Haruto, but Flay flatly refused his offer. She boldly announced that he is now her master for life, but the warrior explained that he had come to save his nephew as the king's brother. The considerate man even brought baby milk along, but Flay took offense as she argued with him, totally ignoring Haruto, who was drying up like a used onion. She also asked why he decided to come for an abandoned child, causing the warrior to narrate how his son died at childbirth, so he wanted to be there for the child who is still alive. His sob story finally got to Flay as she burst out a fountain of tears, still ignoring a starving Haruto. The man recognized her as a demon, but seeing that she didn't harm Haruto, he offered to make her his attendant, which she agreed to. Before they left, he faked Haruto's death to ensure everyone assumed he was eaten by a wild demon. 9 years later in Margrave Gold's estate, Haruto now had a younger sister named Charlotte. While this life has been peaceful so far, he thought Charlotte sensed his degenerate energy and hated his guts, which made him uneasy, although Flay had no idea what the problem was. Watching her always play with Flay somewhat made him sad, so his mom came to cheer him up, because she assumed Charlotte was probably just shy around him. This further cemented the fact that she probably knew he was a 30-year-old virgin, and he immediately slumped into depression. However, his mom told him to do something special to earn her trust, but he was more concerned why the woman didn't act like regular NPC moms who only said during serious situations. In his room, Haruto was holding a therapy session with the clone he created to replace him when he decided to ditch the family. The main problem was that Flay would definitely follow him, and that would make Charlotte sad. Unfortunately, his clone couldn't talk yet, and for a minute, he thought of creating a clone for Flay as well. Just then, his dad called him out, so he went to the courtyard to begin his first sword training. The look on his face made the old man remind him that his mana level was trash, so he asked if he had interest in other stuff that didn't depend on magic. He wanted to beg to be a shut-in for life, but he held his intrusive thoughts and said he would like to study ancient magic. Seeing that the old man was impressed, he wanted to go back to his ancient magic research, only to be stopped and handed the sword since he might have talent for it. His dad then activated his warrior aura, which made Haruto assume he would be screwed if he is hit, so he boosted his physical abilities with his barrier. He then jumped to land an attack which was easily dodged, but he broke his sword on impact with the ground and created a big dent which impressed his dad. The old man made a stand and moved to attack Haruto, but he dodged it by jumping high. He is then told that the attack could only have been dodged by someone above level 30, and this made him recall how he analyzed his magic several times but it was still at level 2. However, he decided to just let it go since his barrier magic was pretty handy. Back in the present, his dad revealed that regardless of his innate abilities, he'd have to begin training to sharpen up. That evening in the office, Gold told his wife that Haruto might be a returned demon, causing her to freak out. He added that he was aware that the royal family had a history of bedding demons, and this might explain his powers. Since he didn't have horns and a tail, he thought the secret might lie in the royal crest, which might also explain why Flay, a demon, followed him around. Regardless of what might be true, they still made up their mind to protect him like they've been doing. While chilling in his room some weeks later, Haruto heard some commotion outside, so he checked the surveillance footage and discovered a bunch of injured knights receiving treatment outside the castle. When he asked Gold what had happened, he explained that they've been secretly battling attacks from thieves, and when they finally found their hideout, they were ambushed from behind. Flay was busy mocking them for being weak ass-cannon fodders when Haruto told her to shut up while he looked visibly pissed. He then walked around the field as he secretly used his barriers to kill the injured knights one by one, without drawing attention to himself. Later that night, Haruto woke up only to find Flay waiting at his door, because apparently she was still obeying his previous order telling her to shut up. He said she could now speak, but she continued to apologize as she had no idea why he was mad at her. He then took her outside and showed her some surveillance footage around the domain in hopes of finding the group of bandits that made a mess of Gold's forces. He soon found the group of bandits, and that's when Flay revealed that they could only have succeeded with the ambush if someone was leaking info. This meant that there was a spy in the army. However, Haruto and Flay decided to fly over to the bandits' location while Charlotte spotted them from the window. At the same time, the bandits were celebrating their victory over the knights as they planned to return to their province with good news. But then Haruto showed up and immediately froze them with some barriers. Rabbit Teeth foolishly thought Haruto was a kid and ended up getting married to the wall. Haruto then threatened to roast them if they didn't answer his questions, so they ended up revealing their identity as soldiers of the neighboring empire, while adding that they had an accomplice that helped them into the country. They'd also begged for their lives since they cooperated with his interrogation. However, Haruto didn't give two shits and asked Flay to barbecue their asses, which she does happily. As they left, he decided to send an anonymous letter to his dad about the successful eradication of the bandits, so the following day a messenger brought in the letter. But this only made Gold more worried, having learned that the Empire was involved. Charlotte wanted to know who took care of the bandits, and after analyzing the way the situation was handled, he concluded that the demon Flay, now turned babysitter, was responsible. Charlotte then went out, having recalled seeing her degenerate brother flying across the window. She asked Flay why there were two Harutos, but a dense Flay thought she was mad, so she explained how she saw them flying away, but also found Haruto sleeping in his room, although he didn't have the usual scary aura. Instead of answering her question, Flay started fangirling over Haruto and singing his praises to the little girl who wanted to pry further, but Flay warned her not to worry about trivial matters, or she won't develop heavy plots like her. Later in the day, Flay went to report Charlotte's inquiries to Horuto, who decided to increase surveillance around the little genius who could ruin Operation Ditch the Family and become a NEET. That night, Charlotte turned on creepy stalker mode on Horuto, and when he tried to talk to her, she made a run for it. Even while he was bathing, the cultured girl still followed him around. She kept this on for days after days, regardless of the situation, until it was exactly a week. During dinner, Gold revealed that Charlotte and her mom would be going on a trip for the annual festival, so Haruto suggested they take Flay along, and that's when he recalled that she was scaring monsters away from their domain as per his request. One afternoon, Haruto is woken up by alarms from the surveillance he placed on Charlotte a few weeks back, as they were being attacked by a gang in the forest. As Useful Mom ran for the hills with Charlotte, the attackers fired some spells at them, but she protected Charlotte with a barrier and ended up being the only one hurt. Just then, Haruto used his barriers to give Charlotte instructions, which they used to make their escape around the forest until they got to a cliff. She then jumped down and reduced the effects of the fall with her magic, and together, they were able to get to the hideout Haruto prepared. Although Useful Mom didn't know who was helping them, she wanted to make herself bait to keep Charlotte safe. She then came out of the cave and encountered the soldiers, so she drew her blade on herself to ensure she didn't become a hostage. Thankfully, Haruto shattered the knife in time, and while he held her in anger, he heated the men away just by yelling. He then went into the cave to put Charlotte's mind at ease, although he was unknowingly intimidating her with his bizarre aura. But since he saved them, she summoned the courage to call his name for the first time ever. They are then faced with a brief awkward situation, and when she asked if he was a hero of justice, he decided to just go with the flow, which she was surprisingly into. She then confessed to profiling him as a closet creep with a 30-year-old loser energy, but swore to protect his secret moving on. That evening, news concerning the incident was reported to Gold and Haruto, as well as the fact that everyone who was injured were simultaneously healed. Gold then asked what Haruto thought about the situation, to which he responded by claiming the hero was probably on their side, so they need not pry further. He then went on to talk about the Empire soldiers that were captured before, but Gold asked him how he knew about their identity, so he began to glitch while blabbing some random stuff before changing the topic by making Gold realize that there was someone helping the Empire. Gold praised his intelligence and was about to point out a key suspect he called a shrewd vixen, but that's when Charlotte and Useful Mom Natalia came in with Flay. Everyone hugged for some minutes, and then Charlotte went to hug Haruto, which was so shocking for their parents, but she made matters worse by announcing her love for Haruto, which made Flay jealous. From that day onward, Charlotte became Haruto's biggest fan and would often pester him all day long. When she noticed his surveillance screen, she asked if it was ancient magic, and he decided to indulge her while secretly regretting why he lied about researching ancient magic. He tried to change the subject of discussion, but Charlotte said that there were a bunch of books about ancient magic in the library, so she offered to take him there. When they got to their massive library that could probably serve an actual university, Charlotte began to move around, and after a short while, she returned with some books. Together they learned that ancient magic isn't tied to any element, unlike modern magic, that can be classified into 4 elements. He soon discovered that his barrier magic was a type of ancient magic, while Charlotte said she was also studying ancient magic, with the help of Natalia and Flay. When she begged him to also help her study, she didn't bother to wait for a response before going to sit on him, which got Haruto uncomfortable, but she didn't seem to mind. While studying, the stories in the books reminded Haruto of his former world where he could watch anime all day. Since he spoke out loud, Charlotte took an interest in the topic, so he had to spend time explaining what anime is about and how fun it was. He ended up geeking out and thought he terrified the girl. However, she was deeply moved by the explanation and now wanted to see it for herself. Seeing how excited she was, Haruto decided to put his energy into anime research, and after 2 weeks, he was able to connect into a Japanese internet server, which allowed him access to his unlimited Pro Neat account. He also gave her the liberty of choosing what she wanted to watch, and as expected, she got so engrossed in a matter of seconds. Despite her eyes beaming with joy, she claimed she couldn't understand their language and asked him to teach her. He had his doubts at first, but in mere 6 hours, she had already mastered hiragana and katakana, as well as mid-grade kanji, which most adults struggled to learn for years. In time, she became an otaku that couldn't stop watching anime, and the stupid boy who had been letting her do as she pleased soon realized he might be ruining her future by turning her into an anime addict. He became incredibly conflicted given that she was so happy, but he summoned the courage and said she would only be allowed 3 hours of television daily. Just hearing this drained the life out of her eyes, and when she asked why, he claimed that it was grossly unhealthy for kids. Son refused to budge no matter what. During dinner, everyone noticed Charlotte dozing off, so Gold asked what she and Haruto were always doing in his room, but before he could answer, Charlotte said they'd been studying ancient magic. After dinner, she continued to follow him thinking he might let her watch one more episode, but he refused. Even when he went to bathe, she threw privacy out the window and tagged along, which allowed her to notice the crest on his breasts, but for some reason she started blabbing about Orochimaru's curse mark. After bathing, Charlotte refused to leave his side, and even Natalia was proud that her daughter was now bold enough to make a move. The following day, Gold and his forces moved out to take care of the remaining bandits in his domain and close to the borders. Inside, Charlotte was visibly worried about their safety, so Haruto explained that the remaining bandits were regular commoners unlike the Empire soldiers they faced before. Charlotte wondered why anyone would decide to become a bandit, and Haruto had to explain the power struggle going on in the kingdom, but still she wished everyone could live peacefully. Haruto said it was literally impossible, but this made her gas him up, praising his incredible powers while begging him to join the battle with so much passion that he couldn't refuse her sparkling eyes. To please her fantasy, he conjured a superhero joke of a suit, but no one cared since she loved it. Even Haruto was choking from embarrassment from wearing a stupid helmet with tinted glass and freaking horns. Charlotte wanted to go with him so badly, but he refused and instead gave her a front seat experience from the room. He soon got to the forest and immediately trapped them in a barrier. He wanted to let Gold do the remaining work, but since Charlotte was watching, he went on to do a ridiculous superhero pose before knocking their asses, while feeling guilty of bullying the weak. Gold soon showed up and asked who he was, to which he responded that it was still pending. He ended up embarrassing himself in his embarrassing costume, and could only say he was fighting for justice before flying away. Back at home, Charlotte was so moved by his clownish performance that he made a habit of fighting bandits around the domain, and was eventually nicknamed the Black Knight. Sometime later, he finally finished his clone masterpiece that was just as lazy and unmotivated as him. Charlotte also showed up in the room and discovered 2 talking Haruto with very annoying characters. When Flay requested his presence outside, Haruto asked his clone to replace him, but the useless guy refused. Outside, they welcomed a cocky brat named Prince Laius and his well-mannered sister, Princess Marianne. Apparently, they were Haruto's actual siblings who weren't tossed in the bush like his useless ass. It didn't take long for Laius to cause a scene, and when Marianne tried to stop him, he bluntly said she was a bitch who would end up as a political tool. Laius also took note of Haruto's smug look and called him a level 2 scum who should be taught manners. He then requested for a duel, promising to go easy on him. However, all Haruto could think of was why his head was so big. He checked Laius's level, which was currently at 9 with the potential to get to level 40, and since the highest level in the country was 77, it meant that unlike Gold and Charlotte, he was pretty high. Laius suddenly launched towards him, but he went out of the way, which made the brat extremely pissed. Haruto then used a strengthening barrier on himself and allowed the brat to turn him into a human piñata to elevate his ego. However, Laius made the mistake of asking him to fight back, and Haruto immediately showed up behind him and smacked his head. He continued to ridicule him for a while, and even Marianne said there was no way Haruto was level 2. Laius then attacked with a fireball, only for Haruto to suck it into his barrier easily. He continued to toss several baby fireballs at him, but they just kept getting sucked in, which made Marianne ask him to stop. When they asked what truck he was using, Haruto revealed that he was simply using his innate magic, but Laius claimed it was impossible, so to show off released the fireballs he absorbed, and the brat finally gave up. Haruto was just about to rush back inside, but then Marianne came to apologize and also asked if he was truly level 2. Back inside, he realized that everyone somehow knew he was a level 2 scum and wondered if his birth parents might have been looking for him. Days passed and Charlotte became obsessed with the surveillance footage and often drew Haruto's attention to anything amiss. Flay then showed up and asked to accompany him on his missions, but Haruto didn't want her dense ass complicating things, so he reminded her of her load of chores. but she claimed to have finished everything on time. Charlotte saw it as an opportunity for the story to introduce a side character that'll help the hero, and as expected, Flay played along and Haruto had no choice but to let her join him. Before they set out, he warned her not to spill any tomato sauce since Charlotte would be watching. He then showed up where the bandits were and did a ridiculous introductory pose, while Flay came from behind wearing a bodysuit. She immediately began to roast them with her flames, and Haruto had to protect the bandits from the unhinged demon. But the clueless girl didn't realize it was Haruto's barriers, so she prepared even more powerful flames, and Haruto had to stop her before she went too far. Back at home, while Charlotte praised their non-existent teamwork, Flay wondered why flames couldn't reach the bandits and swore to let loose during the next mission. Meanwhile, in the castle, Laius was fuming, having gotten schooled by level 2 nobody in front of the guards. Just then, his attendants came in to prepare him for the banquet, while also informing him of a tour with Charlotte the following day. He first told them to cancel it, however his attendant made him agree to the arrangement. That evening, Charlotte and Haruto's clone, who we'll just call Haru for sanity's sake, arrived from the banquet to find Haruto sleeping. When the food arrived, he was about to feast on it, but Haru lashed out for making him endure the royal banquet, which was hell on earth. He then snapped and vowed never to attend such gatherings again, but Charlotte helped to put his mind at ease by revealing she'd be with him for the tour with the prince. This made Haruto wonder if Laius was into Lolas, so he decided to accompany her for good measure. That night, he checked the route of the tour to ensure it was safe, only to find a shady group performing a summoning ritual. So he went to the location and casually asked what they were doing. The men immediately freaked out, since he looked more like an occult leader than them. However, Haruto only wanted to know if they got approval from Lord Gold. This made the men treat him like an enemy as they directed their magic circles towards him, only to be defeated in a blink of an eye. The leader then used the giant magic circle to summon a bunch of skeleton knights and directed them to attack him. Although he destroyed them with his sword, they simply reassembled their parts before surrounding him. But he managed to distance himself from the creeps. He soon noticed their cores and corrupted them, causing him to take over control from the mages. They then summoned a golem that began to run riot, even managing to throw a powerful punch that sent Haruto flying. When the golem approached him again, he noticed its core, so he dodged its attack before conjuring a rock stake to destroy the core and shut it down. Next, he took control of the golem and made it attack its creators, making the leader confused, so Haruto explained that he mistakenly altered their magic formula. After rounding them up, he tried to interrogate the leader, but there was no way the guy could be intimidated by a clown. So Haruto decided to bury his men alive, and this made the leader give in and confess their identity as the Queen's personal summoning unit, who were supposed to attack the tour. He then asked what their goal was, and the leader said they were asked to assassinate Charlotte, while adding that Charlotte had the potential to surpass the Queen. So to avoid the possibility of a power struggle in the future, they even hired Empire soldiers to do the dirty work, and they only stepped in after their previous attempts failed. At that point, Haruto realized all the unrest in the region was the Queen's doing, as he recalled how she easily abandoned him just to protect her status. His anger was so visible that the golem under his control began to go berserk, so he had to calm himself and stop it from squashing anyone, while he wondered how he'd handle his evil mother. The following day, while they went for the tour, Charlotte brought up Laius's duel against Haruto, telling him not to feel bad since he never stood a chance. This only made him more pissed, and when Haruto tried calming the situation, Laius told him to shut up. He asked what type of magic Haruto used, and he explained that he can create any technique he wants, causing them to freak out. So Laius suggested he might be a returned demon. Haruto looked confused, so Charlotte explained that the descendants of mixed human and demon blood who have demonic traits are called returned demons. Marianne observed that he had no horns, weird eyes, or a tail, and Charlotte boldly announced that Haruto was purely human since she often bathed with him. This made them freak out as they tried to shut out the Alabama thought from their minds. However, the carriage suddenly stopped, so they headed out to observe the vast field of wheat. While Charlotte had fun with her cousins, Haruto asked his dad what he'd do if the Queen was supposedly after Charlotte's life. He tried to make it sound hypothetical, but it turned out Gold already had an idea thanks to the Black Knight directing him to the captured mages the previous night. Gold said the Queen had always wanted them dead, but he couldn't possibly do anything since she had authority over them, and this made Haruto pray for her to disappear. Gold said he shouldn't wish for such a thing, since the queen was responsible for keeping the capital stable after the king fell from power. He also narrated how the queen defeated the demon lord and was hailed as the Flash Princess, and that allowed her to gain power little by little, which she now used to keep the nobles in check. Horuto suggested Gold become king instead, but he refused, saying he was only a musclehead good at winging his huge hammer. He said only Charlotte could take up such a role, but she's still too young, so he implored Horuto to protect her until the time comes. After the discussion, Flay volunteered to dice the head of the queen. However, Horuto said the battle was personal, and he must handle her himself. Meanwhile, at the capital, while the queen wondered why her assassination plans failed, she was told someone running around in a Power Ranger costume was the one ruining their plans, and this news made her spill her wine on the useless attendant, as she reminded them they'd already failed 3 times. She also reminded them how big of a threat Charlotte was to her throne, and the thought of fighting someone powerful to achieve her goal had her smiling mischievously as she wielded her sword. As if to answer her prayer, Horuto spoke from the background, which put everyone on guard, but he used his barriers to make them fall asleep. He then emerged from the shadows, and when she asked how he got past her barriers, he claimed he could even break the 4th wall if he wanted to. Seeing his ugly helmet, she realized he was the Black Knight, so she conjured a bunch of magic circles simultaneously, which impressed Horuto. But one got under him suddenly, causing him to be trapped in a ball of water, as she hoped to drown him only for Horuto to step out of the ball easily. Next, she sent her killer icicles at him, which he blocked, but she had already conjured a mighty flame that was intended to roast him to crisp. When the flame burned out, she thought he was already barbecued. However, he complimented her how close she was to becoming the Avatar and proceeded to attack her, but she was barely able to block it. When he decided to get serious, they both began a super-fast exchange of spells with the queen, who was on the defensive, noting that he had more mana than the Demon King she previously defeated. Seeing that her well of mana was going to dry up, she launched towards him with her sword, but he conjured his and parried her strike. He indulged her with a sword fight, causing her to gain a little confidence as she pushed him down with all might while boasting about her superior swordsmanship. However, it only took an instant for him to defeat her. As punishment, he placed a sleigh collar on her neck, and the bitch began to bark even before he placed any condition on the collar. He then revealed that her head would fall off immediately if she tried to remove the collar, and when she heard this, she asked what his goal was, to which he responded that he didn't give 2 shits about her fake wig. He warned her not to harm Margrave Gold or any of his family members if she valued her life, and proceeded to ironically intimidate her with his immense mana before leaving. As he left, she cried like someone whose date dumped her on prom night as she fell into despair. Still in the castle, Flay thought he was too lenient with the method he used to punish the queen. However, he said he won't be merciful the next time she pisses him off. 5 years later, during winter, Charlotte alongside Flay and Horuto were taking a stroll on the snow. Horuto was glad his bitch mother became an introvert and thought about how his 15th birthday meant his plans to live as a shut-in neat was soon going to be a reality. While Flay displayed her hidden snow craftsmanship skill, Horuto noticed she was shivering in her maid outfit, although she tried to deny it while vibrating like a bad washing machine. Seeing how helpless she looked, he made her a winter cloth and instructed her to always tell him if she had any issues, only to deny her before she even spoke. And then the sister complex freak accepted Charlotte's demand for him to show her a snow attack. Once she told him the anime the spell was from, he walked in front of them and began role-playing a protagonist from a low-budget anime before screaming bloody iceberg as he created a massive hole on the floor just like the one my ex left in my heart. Although he was embarrassed, seeing Charlotte so happy was all the food he needed to last a week. Just then, their parents showed up and noticed the massive hole on the ground, so the quick-thinking Horuto made his clone show up as the Black Knight. Horuto claimed he was showing Charlotte his special move, and a suspicious Gold decided not to pry further. All the girls have fun. Gold said the queen had not been seen in public for some time, and he also heard a rumor that she now wore a slave collar, although some people still assumed it was her gothic fashion style. Hearing this made Horuto glad that he could now laze around in his room. However, Gold suddenly revealed that he must enroll in the Royal Academy once spring arrives. This revelation made Horuto's mode crash into the negative, so he kept refusing the instructions as he fell on his knees while planning how to avoid the hell-called school. Back at home, Gold tried to make him see reason, and added that he didn't have a choice since it was a recommendation letter from the king. He'd assumed it was probably because Princess Marion had her hots for him. But Haruto tried to shake off the possibility of a forbidden relationship. Gold added that the king also wanted him to be friends with the prick Lias, but this only drained the life out of him. Although Gold assumed that the queen might also have a secret plan in place, he also wanted him to experience life outside the castle regardless. Once Haruto finally agreed to enroll, Gold instructed him to take an attendant with him, but he claimed it would be unnecessary. However, his dad was insistent. His mind thought of Flay, but that was already out of the question as she was a scatterbrain not fit for urban life. Now played with who to choose, Natalia showed up and volunteered to take care of him since she was the one who changed her diapers. However, they all refused her gracious offer and left the poor woman saddened. In his room, he asked Haru to represent him in school since that's what he was made for, but the useless clone refused. However, Haruto revealed that since he can't use magic, he would get expelled pretty quick, but Haru pointed out that he could also pull it off. They soon began to argue with Haru throwing a tantrum like a little kid with a mental breakdown, which was so pathetic to watch. So Haruto promised to cast a barrier on him to keep him safe from bullies, and they both sealed the agreement with a handshake. The following day, Haruto was chilling in the mountain cabin he spent 5 years preparing for his shut-in life. And while he wasted his time playing video games, Charlotte came to ruin the serenity as she demanded to watch her favorite anime. Once she finished the episode, she complained that Gold was restricting the amount of time she came to the forest since it was dangerous. This gave Haruto an idea, so he simply created a teleportation gate that he tested with an apple, although he revealed that it might be unsafe for living beings. So Ruthless Flay suggested that they use Haru as a lab rat. Haruto actually listened to her and asked Haru, who was in the mansion, to come through the door he created. However, Haru knew exactly what was going on and refused to be their lab rat, but this made Flay so angry that she passed through the door and yeeted his ass through it, which meant that the spell was successful. While playing video games some days later, Haruto suddenly screamed as he realized he had not yet picked an attendant. He didn't want Flay to catch on and throw a tantrum, so he told them he was going out for a walk. As he walked around the forest, he took a path that led him to a village where skeletons were living the good life. Everyone went to meet him when they noticed his arrival, and the leader called Johnny led the welcome salute. As it happened, the skeletons were the ones from 5 years ago, who grew attached to his rise and began following him around, so he had to provide them a home. When Johnny asked if he wanted anything, Haruto asked why he was trying to be Rimuru by inviting other monsters to the village, but he said it was Flay who brought the stray monsters in. Johnny also offered to show him around the expanding village, so they went around checking the fields where he rambled about their harvest, but Haruto was more impressed since the skeletons were working hard for the other monsters because they don't eat. He continued his rambling during the tour, and although Haruto already spaced out, he thought Johnny had the perfect qualities to be an attendant if only he had some flesh. However, the only issue was that he talked too much, which was definitely something he couldn't deal with. When Johnny noticed he was lost in thought, he asked what was wrong, but Haruto curbed the question and praised his hard work, which made him more determined to do his best. He was still about to show in more districts, but Haruto refused the offer and went to chill by a river where his peace and tranquility didn't last as Jigen the Golem came to spend quality time with her master. She gave Haruto a flower and spoke in a feminine voice which creeped Haruto out more than Lil Nas X antics. The Golem was literally blushing, and his compliments got to her head and made it overheat. With no luck in finding an attendant, he walked back home only to be welcomed by Flay, who had discovered he had been searching for an attendant. He recalled Gold's stern warning not to take Flay, and he told her to mind her business, which broke her heart as he walked away. The following day, Charlotte announced that she had gotten a proper name for the Black Knight, which she read as Adolf Hitler or Shiva for short. She claimed it was the name suitable for the god of destruction and creation, and it was perfect for him. But Haruto was more heartbroken for turning a noble child into an internet addict. She also went to the monster village and praised Haruto for building such a place, even though it was mostly Flay's work. She decided to come up with a name for the village and choose Pandemonium, which a clueless Johnny seemed to love. At the same time, atop a mountain, some adventurers were facing off against a blue blizzard dragon that was about to freeze them into human action figures. However, it suddenly flew away from them, only to fall victim to an avalanche that left her in pain. News got to Gold about the dragon spotted near the border, and although Haruto said it wasn't their business, Gold thought it might go on a rampage when it recovered and asked Flay to check out the situation, but she refused since only Haruto can order her around, so Haruto told her to comply. He still noticed that she was hesitant, and she explained that the dragon was probably old, but she had no idea of its existence, which only meant that it didn't participate in the war between humans and demons during the Demon King's reign. She said there was no point in helping a coward that hid away in the mountains, and this made Haruto ask Gold to give them some time. As they left the room, they found Charlotte listening, and she begged them to help the dragon while making a big puppy eyes, and Flay had to agree. That afternoon, Haruto and Flay went up the mountain and found the injured dragon as well as a group of adventurers closing in on its location. Just as the adventurers were about to pull an all-out attack on the defenseless dragon, Haruto dropkicked one of them as he made an entrance with Flay. He immediately healed the dragon while Flay prepared to barbecue everyone present, but Haruto protected them from the psycho. Once the dragon recovered, Haruto tried to introduce himself, but it froze him on the spot, which made Flay pissed, and surprisingly, Haruto also threw a tantrum and even threatened to undo his healing. She soon realized Haruto was the one that healed her as well as Flay's identity as a demon, so she asked why she was accompanying a human, to which Flay responded by proudly narrating their relationship for over an hour. The only thing she picked from the story was that Haruto was the demon lord reincarnated, so she apologized for not joining in the war, because she had always been a pacifist. She said she had been chilling only in the mountains for 300 years, causing Haruto to realize she was a shut-in bookworm or more like a book dragon. Haruto wanted to know how she pulled off her marathon shut-in life, so she narrated how she got engrossed with a book an adventurer left behind in her cave, and that led her into the city disguised as a human in search for more books. However, her peaceful life ended when adventurers raided her cave, and that's how she ended up in such a situation that moved Flay to tears, and she decided to accept her into Pandemonium. She then thanked them properly for saving her life, and after she swore loyalty to Haruto, she transformed into a Plotless law lead that Haruto quickly gave some armor since this was a PG anime. Haruto then introduced himself as the Margrave's son, but she claimed she didn't have a name and asked him for one, so Haruto just called her Liza, which she accepted warmly. However, Flay came between them and named herself Haruto's main chick. As Haruto flew away, Liza conveniently sprouted wings, which made Flay so jealous that she turned into the Red Flash and chased after them. The next day, Haruto casually introduced Liza as his new dragon maid, and the weird-ass family just accepted her like it was a completely normal thing. Gold said all she had to do was abide by the rules of the house, and she is free to eat whoever she likes that isn't blonde. Flay immediately took her outside to teach her how to use a broom, only for the brute to end up breaking it while acting like it was part of the lesson. Liza actually did a good job and was able to gather all the leaves in a short time, so Flay took her to the kitchen to teach her how to wash the dishes, and while Liza did a good job, Flay kept breaking whatever she touched. They then moved to cooking lessons where Flay made a burnt offering while Liza did extremely well, impressing the maids so much that they served her curry to the family, who all praised her efforts, while Flay sat in the corner looking depressed. She also took care of Charlotte's needs without anyone instructing her, and when Attilia asked what she was interested in other than being a maid, she said she loved books and practicing magic. So Natalia suggested that she become Charlotte's personal maid and magic tutor, and everyone agreed to it. The following day, she took up her role diligently, and after dressing Charlotte, she gave her some magic lessons for a while before going to the library to tutor her. By afternoon, Haruto noticed that Charlotte's spells showed great improvement. However, he was more interested in the ball of water above Liza, who explained that she was doing the laundry with magic. As expected, the two girls easily bonded with each other, and Haruto burned the precious sight into his degenerate mind. He thought of how well-mannered and adapted Liza was, which made him realize he had been ignoring the perfect candidate to be his attendant all along. However, the thought of taking away Charlotte's friend couldn't let him present the issue, so he thought of an alternative and realized that he could use the door to send Liza back to the mansion after the formalities. A few days later, Charlotte looked like she was run over simply because her favorite anime just ended. But Haruto tried to comfort her by revealing that another show would begin the following week. Liza pointed out that their break was over, but before they left, Haruto said that he would be attending school soon. This piqued Charlotte's interest as the otaku started fantasizing about student councils and duels, so he screamed at Liza to summon the Knights of the Round Table. These included Flay, Liza, Jigen, and Johnny, as well as the leader Charlotte, who swore them to secrecy before revealing that Horuto would be attending the Royal Academy. Flay was furious that no one told her such a thing, and when Charlotte tried to calm her down, she wanted to blab about Horuto being the Demon Lord, only to be silenced by Johnny, who reminded her that Charlotte was still around. However, the smartass noticed they were hiding something and wanted to know what it was, but no one was willing to spill the beans. To calm her, Johnny switched topics and showered her with praise, which succeeded in distracting her. Moving on, Charlotte argued that Horuto wouldn't agree to attend school under normal circumstances, because he once told her that a school is an extremely dangerous place. She interpreted his regular social anxiety into something deeper by suggesting a secret student council who do evil things to students with the backing of an evil syndicate that wants the downfall of the kingdom. Apparently that was why Horuto agreed to attend school, so he could put an end to their evil plans, and all the clowns of the Round Table actually believed her delusions. Charlotte said she and Flay would investigate the capital, and when Lisa suggested that they talk to Horuto first, the lot of them came up with ridiculous excuses of why trivial matters must be handled by the clowns, sorry Knights of the Round Table. Later that day, Lisa went to snitch to Horuto, and he thanked her for reporting to him. However, she acted like she actually bought Charlotte's fairy tales. So Horuto decided to play along with the evil syndicate investigation and asked her to come with him to the capital in order to fulfill his mission, which she agreed to. With that settled, all that was left was to get himself expelled and continue with his neat life. One night, Horuto checked everyone's magic level, with Flay being a little higher than Lisa. However, Charlotte's level was very high for a regular human, as he recalled the queen was at level 44. Horuto was already planning how to make her overpowered in no time, but Charlotte narrated how she could create fireballs even as a baby, causing Natalia to seal her mana. A few days later, Horuto is seen off by his family, and Gold made sure Lisa hid her horns and tails, which honestly wasn't an easy task, while Flay felt betrayed and abandoned, so Charlotte had to console her. At the same time, Marianne barged into Laius's room while holding a letter from Gold about Horuto's departure from their province. But Laius didn't look like he cared, even though she pointed out that he was partly responsible for Horuto's recommendation letter. She asked why he did that, and Laius told her he wanted to know why Horuto was so strong, as he needed to fight him again after training well. He also teased Marianne for managing to convince the king to send the letter by locking herself in her room even though she wasn't a Disney princess, and this made both siblings unknowingly confess their obsession with Horuto, so they stopped bickering. Laius asked how she was handling the cultists causing trouble in the school, and Marianne revealed that the Church of Lucifera had been openly imposing their extreme ideologies on people even though they worship a demon. The real problem was that a faction from the cult were gunning to overthrow the monarchy, and as expected, unsatisfied nobles had been joining their rank, so they had no issue of funding. Laius said their mother might even be involved, since she had been acting strangely ever since she got a collar on her neck 5 years ago. He said the woman always left him terrified, and since she and the king were on bad terms, she probably wanted to crush him using the cult. On hearing this, Marianne thought that Horuto might have a part to play in the unfolding situation, although Laius didn't see how that would be possible. But she claimed that she sensed an incredible power that could easily destroy an organization within him. This made Laius recall the appearance of the Black Knight, who was able to defeat a dragon, so he suggested they asked him for help. But that's when the devious queen revealed that she'd been eavesdropping on their conversation. Her kids freaked out on seeing her, and she immediately began choking Marianne, just because she stared at her collar. The unhinged bitch only stopped strangling her daughter because Laius was in the room as a witness, and after she stopped, she told Laius to keep an eye on Horuto and learn everything about the Black Knight from him. But the poor boy was holding his breath, so she made him comply with just a look before leaving while laughing like a psychopath. Once she left, Laius was feeling guilty for dragging Horuto into their family drama, and at the other end, Horuto was still at his cabin playing games casually. Before he finally left, Flay begged him to take her with him one last time, but he refused as usual. Charlotte pat Flay on the head and reminded her of their secret mission, while urging Horuto to leave faster, promising to take care of the cabin. Horuto and Lisa then popped out of a door from a forest close to the capital. However, he got discouraged when he realized the gate was so far off, and they couldn't possibly fly. Just then, they noticed an evil bison going after a carriage on its way to the capital. But instead of helping out, Horuto wondered why carnivorous bisons existed. He then transformed and flew towards them, but the carriage crashed, so he cushioned the little girl's fall. As the bison approached them, a white-haired girl decided to play hero and Haruto willingly left the stage for her, only for the bison to yeet her away like a frisbee. It was about to ram into her when Haruto defeated it with ease, before healing the girl's broken body with his multipurpose barrier. She noticed that he didn't use healing magic and Haruto was about to make himself scarce when a kid showed up and looked like he just saw his favorite Black Power Ranger come to life. Haruto then did his ridiculous pose, which confirmed that a part of him enjoyed it, and afterwards, he fixed their carriage, making it as good as new, making the girl vow to repay him. But he told her not to worry and said he was going to take the monster back to the forest. This impressed her since people didn't usually show kindness to monsters, and after they said their goodbyes, he forced the bison to eat grass in the forest. While walking to the gate, Liza said the white-haired girl felt strange. However, she was too far away to place her head around the cause. Haruto said he could care less, so they made their way to the academy ground where they met a long line of applicants that triggered Haruto's social anxiety. He noticed how everyone was flashy, and all through the process of application, it felt like life was draining from him slowly. They soon got to their room, which was pretty spacious with a section for Liza. However, Haruto immediately created a door home and went straight to the couch to relax. He asked Flay to make something for him, which she gladly obliged, but Charlotte suggested they buy food from the capital. She objected at first, but Charlotte took her to a corner and convinced her, causing her to fall in line and immediately dressed up to cover her horns. Haruto noticed how ridiculous she looked, so used his powers to hide her demonic features. Together, they arrived at the bustling part of the capital before heading to a fancy restaurant where they all ate. Charlotte then brought out a map of the city, and when he asked what it was for, she ignored him and began allocating parts of the capital for each of them to investigate. She openly blurted out the whole evil syndicate bullshit, and Haruto decided to play along. But when the gang parted ways, she said it was going to be a date, causing Haruto to climax as he desperately tried to hide his excitement. They then began exploring different parts of town, one after the other, until they came to a jewelry store, so the sister complex creep bought whatever she requested. While walking excitedly, Charlotte bumped into a white-haired girl who immediately apologized to make her feel better, and when she saw Haruto, she asked if they'd met before, but denied it, even though she added that his enormous mana was indistinguishable. Haruto told her his mana was at level 2, and this made her apologize before running away in haste. As she left, Charlotte said she didn't feel like a regular human, which made Haruto wonder if people with high mana levels have sharp senses. The following day, Haru told Haruto of the compulsory proficiency exam they were supposed to take and said there was no way he would take it since he had already done enough by covering for him. Haruto wondered why he had to take an exam, but then realized it was his chance to do poorly and get himself kicked out of the academy even before the entrance examination. This got him so excited that he hurried out to the venue of the exam while acting sneakily only for a constipated professor to show up behind him and claim he was his examiner. He is then taken to the hall, which was so large that he was already scared of the number of people he would have to take classes with. He was given his question papers, and surprisingly, he didn't even need to pretend as his brain couldn't answer such questions. He decided to write the same answers in most of them, but when he saw a question related to barrier magic, he wrote the correct answers since they might catch on if he couldn't answer questions about the magic he uses. The last question turned out to be ancient magic, which made him recall a certain book he forced himself to read while fooling gold. So he wrote some lines from what he learned with Charlotte. When it was time for mana assessment, Haruto shamelessly told the professor he was level 2, but the man insisted on following protocol. He took Haruto to a room where a lady welcomed them. However, he couldn't locate the voice until he looked down and saw a midget. She began observing his features and said he was her type before going on to introduce herself with a name worse than a Latin incantation. So we'll just call her Rita. She went ahead to curse him for thinking about her midget statue, even though he said nothing, after which she said she had the authority to send him home if he got on her bad side. But this only made Haruto excited, and she ended up freaking out. She said she liked eccentric men like him, but she soon realized Haruto was more concerned about why her chest showed no elevations. At that point, Haruto was growing old listening to her defend herself without being attacked, and thankfully, the constipated professor drew her attention back to the test. As she went through his score, her mood suddenly dampened as she told them to proceed with the mana assessment. He then placed his hands on the crystal thinking it'll still display level 2, that the ball shined bright before exploding. He thought he broke something expensive and was scared the midget would lash out at him. However, she seemed excited as she told Polkos that the crystal broke because Horuto had too much mana. Polkos argued that Horuto was the well-known level 2 scum, but the midget also pointed out that his test was for Royal Magician applicants, which was why he totally failed it. However, he got the answers for barrier magic and basically dubbed her research paper on ancient magic. This made Horuto realize she was the author of the book he read, and then she announced that she was going to keep his magic level a secret, but he must become her apprentice. She asked him to join her ancient magic research club, but he refused before walking out the door. He went to the dorm to explain to Haru what happened during the test, only to be scolded by his clone for failing to get them expelled. However, they hoped another chance would come. Later that day, Charlotte handed a gun to Haru and said it was from Horuto. Haru was depressed as he wondered why he had to go to the entrance ceremony in place of Horuto, who didn't bother to give him any magical abilities. Now all he had was just the defense magic Horuto casted on him and a gun in case anyone moved crazy. As soon as the ceremony ended, he took off towards the dorm but stopped when he noticed a swarm of flashy extroverts who he was allergic to. He immediately moved to the side like an NPC. However, the leader of the gang stopped the white-haired girl also passing by, causing him to bump into her airbags. Their reunion is then interrupted by the pompous prick who wanted to know why they dared walk past him without greeting. But the girl couldn't give care about someone cosplaying Alucard. He told them he was the vice president, Schneidel, but she said she didn't know him since she was new. So he asked Haru to explain who he is to her. But he suddenly held his stomach like he was in pain. The guy knew he was faking, so got angry and was about to barbecue Haru, who began running away. However, his spell still landed on him. This made Schneidel wear a satisfied look, which soon vanished when Haru stood up like nothing happened, and seeing their shocked reaction. He pretended to be in pain, but it was already too late for that. The white-haired girl called Iris, then apologized to Haru, and from the way she spoke, he realized she was more socially clueless than him. His words made Walmart budget Alucard conjure multiple magic circles that looked very dangerous, so Haru ended up pulling an American breathing while no one was looking, before making himself scarce while the prick screamed in pain. At the dorm, the incident and Ritha's pestering made Haruto give Haru some time off while he stayed behind. That evening, he got a letter from one of Schneidel's goons, which he refused, but she said it was a duel and as a noble. Rejecting it would dishonor his family. She also told him he couldn't lose on purpose before walking away without realizing Iris was listening. Back in the room, he was plagued with the decision of losing, but that meant that he'd have to body attacks, which would be obviously painful. He then noticed Iris talking to the messenger, and even accompanied her to Schneidel's mansion, where she asked him to call off the duel while she took the blame for the incident. She said he was in no shape to fight, but this pissed him off, and he cursed his minions for healing him slowly. Horuto wondered why the dense girl went to someone's harem base alone, and his fears came through when Schneidel asked her to apologize earnestly. When she asked what would please him, he told her to dance naked, and of course she hesitated at first, but she eventually agreed to do it. She began taking off her clothes one after the other as she trembled in fear. She was about to take them all off when Horuto intervened by transporting them into a void. He gave her her clothes and told her to have some self-respect while instructing her to go home. He then approached Schneidel, who still thought he was the main character, so he tried to attack with his fire spell only for Horuto to place a barrier in his injured shoulder. As he screamed in pain, Horuto said he was being punished for causing a commotion in school, as well as bullying a new student. However, he claimed that was the duty of a noble like him. Horuto told him to stop bullshitting as harassing a girl was unforgivable, after which he explained that the clamp on his shoulder would get tighter any time he used magic, and the idiot actually tested it out, which made him scream before Horuto disappeared. Back in his room, his goons immediately tried to heal him, but it only caused him more pain and they couldn't stop themselves from laughing. The following day, all the professors praised him for standing up to Schneidel, and even suggested he take another mana assessment test since he couldn't possibly be level 2. He ran away from the crowd and cursed Schneidel for making him popular. But as he walked past some students, he noticed that they were whispering about him, causing him to hurry back to his room only to stumble on Ritha, who grabbed his shirt. But he refused her demand even before she uttered a word. She then asked him to join her research club once again and forced him to listen to rambling, which was her explaining that every student must enroll in either the knight's course, which involved honing combat and magical skills, or the research course, which specializes in developing new forms of magic. While she tried to convince him to join her department, Laius approached them and was about to hug Haruto, who twisted his arm thinking he was an enemy. It was only when Marianne showed up that he realized the bulky blonde was actually Laius. Once things settled down, the two siblings asked Haruto to join their clubs, and even Rita joined in and began bickering with Laius. He soon realized she was the famous midget professor, causing her to assume the royal family had taken interest in her. However, Laius warned Haruto not to go with the nut job, and eventually they all started bickering again. Just then, Iris showed up to interrupt them, and Haruto didn't miss the opportunity to escape the noisemakers by making up an excuse about an engagement with her, leaving Marianne curious about Haruto's relationship status. Outside, Haruto apologized for dragging her out, but she ignored him and asked if he was the same person she met the previous day. Haruto asked what she meant by her question, and she said that he seemed completely different from the one he encountered yesterday. He unintentionally put up a barrier since he was uneasy that she could differentiate between him and his copy, and this only made matters worse as she could sense his barrier. She claimed she couldn't sense any mana from him the previous day, unlike the dense mana surrounding his body today. Her explanation reminded him of his first encounter with Flay, and he straight up asked if she was a demon, causing her to check herself for horns and tails before saying she was a human, as being a demon would be inconvenient. Haruto then told her to assume he was the same person and then asked what she wanted, to which she responded by first apologizing, then thanking him before asking for a favor. The weird girl bowed her head and asked to be his friend, and immediately mistook his confusion for approval. When he asked why she chose him, she said since she was always running into him, she thought it was fate. He then asked how she had been surviving if she never had a friend, and this made her ask him to listen to her story, and he agreed, but told her to cut out the filler episodes. She said she was abandoned by her birth parents and the next 4 people who took her in, and when he asked what the reason might be, she said it was probably because she could talk even as a baby. She explained how she eventually became a shut-in that ended up with 0 common sense and social skills. Haruto understood her situation but told her he was the wrong person to approach since he was also a socially handicapped shut-in whose only friend was his little sister. But what she picked from the whole thing was that they had so much in common, and so she was now more excited. Meanwhile, the idea of friendship Haruto had was the one-sided bully relationship, which made him settle for using her as his errand girl when convenient. He then asked where she planned to enroll in, and she said she was joining Rita's club, so he decided to also join her. Back at home, the girls wanted to see Haruto so badly, especially Flay, who wanted to be by her master's side. Liz applauded her loyalty and said she liked being on her own instead of serving someone, and this made Flay narrate how she was a close aide to the previous demon lord. She went on about how the demon lord was super nice and was more of a pacifist, so she had to act as his hammer when things got serious. She also claimed he lost to the queen on purpose after allowing everyone in his army to escape because he probably planned to reincarnate as a human. Flay didn't like the fact that he was born from the womb of the very woman who defeated him, but she was sure Haruto was the Demon King reincarnated since he acted the same. When Liz asked what the Demon King's name was, she said it was Iris Philia, which happened to be Iris's name in full. Haruto was about to ditch Iris, only for her to suggest that they sign for the same classes together, leading him to invite her to his apartment. When they got to his door, Haruto realized it might be wrong to invite a girl to his dorm, but he brushed off the doubt and opened the door only to find Charlotte waiting for him. She was about to spill out something unfiltered, but he censored it. However, she went on about his ability to raise as many girls as possible, while announcing her intentions to become his second wife. As she stayed glued to him, he concluded that it was a passing phase he was going to enjoy before she became the cold rebel sister who hates men. They soon began choosing their courses, and when Iris noticed he was using a dice to choose, she asked what he was doing, making Charlotte explain that he is a genius, therefore he'd surely ace any course he picked. After filling the forms halfway, he told Charlotte to finish up for him, which she gladly did. When she was done, Iris asked why he didn't take a look at what she picked, but he told her he trusts his sister completely. This made her ask if he had any life goals, and once again, Charlotte told her Haruto's scope lied far beyond the academy walls. She said Haruto had nothing to learn from the school since he had already transcended a want for human knowledge, and soon Iris was roped into the drama. When Charlotte was about to leave, he closed Iris's eyes, so that she wouldn't start blabbing about how teleportation magic was impossible for humans. A few days later in the cabin, Haruto woke up depressed as his classes were about to begin. Charlotte said he'd probably be in C class, and went ahead to explain how he had a chance to move up to A class when they eventually realized how awesome he is, although he hoped not. He noticed she picked the hardest core classes for him, and she told him anything easier than that would be an insult to him. On the bright side, he realized he could safely flop and disappoint the teachers, but before he left, Charlotte demanded for a hug only for her to stay glued to him for a few minutes. Outside his dorm, Iris was already waiting for him, and he introduced Liza as his assistant. She noticed something was also off about Liza, but decided not to pry further before they went to school. She was shocked when she learned he was in C class, and since she was in A class, she said it was probably because the school paid more attention to the written exam than the practical magic assessment. As she left for class, Liza said she seemed neither human nor demon, but Haruto said he didn't matter as long as she wasn't evil. Immediately he got into his classroom. Everyone stared at him like he was Ryan Gosling, causing him to recall how the Schneidel incident made him a celebrity. The first thing the teachers said was that they were mid-level scum, so they would be taking a test immediately. And this made Haruto excited as a chance to show his incompetence had arrived. However, the test turned out to be simpler than what Charlotte used to solve in her free time, making him assume the teacher was boosting everyone's confidence with the simple test, so he decided it was best to get an average score instead of failing everything. Unfortunately, the students all had seaweed for brains as they couldn't even get past 20% from the test. The teacher said he wasn't surprised, since the test was actually for B class, but he suddenly got a burst of joy as one person scored 60%. Haruto was shocked that his carefully thought-out plan backfired, and as they all clapped for him, he realized Charlotte was simply a genius princess. The teacher then said he'd recommend him to A class, and almost immediately he found himself in A class with the likes of Laius and Iris, who clung to him like magnets. While they argued about who gets to sniff his cologne, they were interrupted by the homeroom teacher, who obviously chose the wrong career path. She said her name was Belcom, and immediately scolded the 3 first years for coming to her advanced class just to make a lot of noise. For their elemental lessons, she made Iris demonstrate by placing her hand on a crystal, which showed that she could use every element. However, her mana level was still at 5, and she asked her to join her research lab in order to build her mana, but she refused. Belcom explained that Iris's main element was chaos magic, while her second greatest attribute was water. However, she claimed it was difficult to quantify people's sub-elements accurately. But Haruto thought differently and easily accessed her stats with his eyes. Belcom then asked Laius why people's sub-elements can improve when they train, but he gave an answer she wasn't satisfied with. When Haruto said it was probably a hidden property, she asks him why he knew so much about the discovery of a secret scholar named Weiss Eul. From what she said about Weiss's advanced research, it was clear Charlotte used what she learned from him well. Belcom then asked him to join her research club, as he could actually be the mysterious Weiss, but he refused. That afternoon, Iris and Haru went to turn in their application form to Rita and Polkos, who looked so excited that they mistakenly revealed the club would have been closed if they didn't join. The 2 professors began preparing for a welcome party while Haru cursed why he had to cover for his lady-ass original. As he was about to leave, they heard Polkos scream, so they went to check on him only to find Schneidel tied up. Rita calmed them down and said she totally forgot he was still there, partly because she couldn't deduce what kind of spell was placed on his shoulders. She said they'd have to make him test subject 1, and to begin, she asked Iris to examine his right shoulders, where she noticed something solid was in his right shoulder. The unhinged midget said he'll scream in pain if healing magic is used. However, regular objects didn't affect him, and this made Iris conclude it was non-elemental magic. Rita gave her full marks and added that it was probably barrier magic, which Haru found impressive. She then asked Haru to distinguish ancient magic, but all the clown could say was that ancient magic was old, and when she turned to smartest Iris, she said ancient magic wasn't bound to any element. Rita pointed out that it could be maintained without supplying mana, and that was why Schneidel was still in pain after several days. She was excited by the possibility of someone who could use the extremely rare ancient magic that only people higher than level 80 could pull off. She wondered who used such magic, and Iris said she wasn't the one even though she was present at the scene. So to figure it out, the little witch smacked Schneidel until he regained consciousness. Once he saw Haruto, He began blabbing about his family ranks. Rita told him to cut the crap because only the person who casted the spell can undo it. So he finally explained that the culprit was dressed like the Black Ranger. With that information, she asked Haruto if he knew the culprit since there's a clown called the Hero of Justice in his province. But he feigned ignorance, which made her point out that the guy conveniently showed up when he enrolled in the academy. It was obvious Haru was hiding something, but she couldn't put her head around, so she began interrogating him like an obsessed nerd. Just then, Haruto showed up as the Black Knight and told the midget that he wasn't affiliated with anyone in the room, while adding that he only came to fight some evildoers. It turned out Rita already knew Schneidel was a member of a cult, causing Haruto to be shocked that Charlotte was right. He told Schneidel he'd undo the spell when he called off the duel and was about to leave when he noticed Rita used a binding spell on him. As she boasted about its strength, he checked her stats and found out the spell was a blend of earth and dark magic. She was about to ask him 271 questions only for him to break out of her spell and also immobilize her as payback. But she was surprisingly excited to witness ancient magic, even though Polkos feared for her safety. In exchange for answering her questions, she offered her chastity to Haruto, who didn't even flinch at her flatness. Soon all the excitement made her want to pee, so she begged him to release her. But he thought she was probably faking it, and it was only after a long session of pleading that he left, releasing her in the process. That evening, they held a welcoming party in the lab, but Haru was more concerned about the sus gaze from a drunk Polkos. When he asked why he was staring, Polkos said they had so much in common. For example, he used to teach Rita when she was young, but somehow became her assistant to support her dream of researching ancient magic. He said she could probably become a sage, but she decided to pursue ancient magic, which was useless in this age. So he began crying and immediately fell into depression since she could never listen to a useless noob magician like him. Meanwhile, Iris got herself drunk and was letting loose while the two guys watched in horror. She suddenly went down the Glock position, which made him freak out and mistook her for an angel. When she fell asleep, Rita said that although Iris could use every element, her magic level was too low, and that's probably why she turned her attention to ancient magic. As she rambled on, she too fell asleep along with Polkos at the same time. Schneidel was throwing a tantrum, having had his plans ruined by the Black Knight. He then called on their family assassin unit and instructed them to take out everyone in the research club. So they immediately surrounded the club building and took their time to confirm that all of them were properly stoned, before they began casting a soundproof barrier while another elite unit prepared to engage. As they approached the building, one guy got bounced by a barrier and fell down in pain. They checked around the house and confirmed that there wasn't any way in, nor could they destroy the wall. Suddenly a door popped up in front of them and a hand dragged one of them in. When the others attacked, the door swallowed their spell, and soon they were dragged in by the doors one after the other. So many clones showed up from the doors to stall their attacks until the real Haruto showed up from above. He immediately negated their spells and sealed their movement, after which he took them all over to Schneidel's estate, but he denied sending the assassins to eliminate them. However, Haruto played a clip of him instructing them and promised to teach him a proper lesson. This made Schneidel so terrified that he injected a drug into his arm that made him transform into an ugly beast that sent Haruto flying out of the building with a punch. While he continued to increase in size, Haruto got a call from Charlotte, who he told that he was fighting a giant monster made by the evil syndicate. She then asked how they could possibly save him, so Haruto began his Hero of Justice roleplay and began the battle with Blonde Hulk. However, his regular barriers were easily destroyed by the monster, so he retaliated with a punch that didn't do any damage, but created an opportunity for him to be sandwiched. He then used his barriers to get himself free, but Schneidel simply ripped off his arms infested by barriers before regenerating rapidly. Charlotte soon noticed something was weird about the monster, but everything was freaking weird. However, she pointed out that the monster had shrunk in size. He then summoned a ton of blades from the skies and did a badass villain pose that signaled the beginning of the sword barrage, which began carving the monster up like frozen cheese until all that was left was a plotless Schneidel. He tried to talk to him, but it turned out the dude had become an invalid, who then ran away while making weird noises. When morning came, Haru woke up and saw Haruto by the window watching over them. He asked if this life was better than his previous shut-in life, and he didn't deny that socializing wasn't so bad, after which he flew away. Later in the capital, Flay and Lissa began their investigation by asking people about the happenings in town. Some delinquents thought it was their chance to score some hot chicks, but they got beat instead. They then reported back to the round table, revealing all they had learned. So, Charlotte played the clip of Haruto's battle with Schneidel, and they ended up praising his ruthlessness instead of investigating Schneidel's relationship with the cult. Back to the topic at hand, Charlotte concluded that the evil student council was behind the attack and drew a map on how to deal with the situation, before instructing them to infiltrate the academy, while Haruto watched them from his room. He thought the Queen might be involved, so he decided to diligently monitor their so-called investigation to make sure they'd be safe. If you've gotten to this point, let's confuse the fake fans by commenting Blonde Hulk. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.